Welcome back to our viewers at CEO.CA. My name is Amrit Gill, and we are at PDAC in Toronto, and it's 2023. Lots of information and lots of insights to get through. So I brought some friends on stage to join us for our critical minerals panel. We have Patrick Cruickshank, CEO and Director of 9 Mile Metals. Rick Mazur, President, CEO, and Director of Forum Energy Metals, joining us on stage. John Timmons, President and CEO of Copper Road Resources, and Brandon Macdonald, CEO of Fireweed Metals. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate having you guys here. So for our audience, just tell us what you guys do and what the goal is for your companies.
I'll start. Patrick Cruickshank, CEO and Director of 9 Mile. We are a Canadian junior exploration company focusing on critical mineral exploration in the world-famous Bathurst mining camp in New Brunswick. We're utilizing new 3D and AI technology to bring a new spotlight to the VMS deposits, historical and new deposits going forward in the camp.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Rick Mazur, CEO of Forum Energy Metals. We're a uranium explorer in the Athabasca Basin of Saskatchewan, and we also have a very interesting copper project in Saskatchewan as well.
Brandon Macdonald with Fireweed Metals. We're focused really on our 2 main flagship projects located in Eastern Yukon Territory, Canada. One is a really large district-scale zinc-lead-silver project. Zinc being the core of that, the critical mineral, and right adjacent to it, we have what is arguably the world's largest and highest grade undeveloped tungsten project in the Macdonald project. So these are both essential and critical minerals and very topical now.
John Timmons, President of Copper Road Resources. We are exploring for copper approximately 80 km north of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and Batchewana Bay. 21,000 hectare project, 2 past producers, literally 30 kilometers of copper, gold, silver, moly showings, and we're back on the ground this year, hoping to work towards a deposit.
Yeah, well, I'd love to start with your perspective on Canada's critical mineral strategy. Is it enough?
It's a little half-baked. I mean, it's better, right? I think the announcement of the critical mineral flow-through was a step in the right direction. Prior to that, I thought it was more of a deterrent than a benefit. I think all of us probably understand that we're not going to be able to sell our projects to China or a Chinese SOE now, which might have been the biggest bidder before. So it's good that they're making progress, I think, but not there yet.
Well, from my perspective, you know, energy is the critical mineral. I mean, if we're going to electrify the world with vehicles and electrification of industries, we need energy. We need tons of it. So just to give you a bit of an example, SNC-Lavalin in 2021 did a study called Engineering Net Zero 2050. And their conclusion was we're going to need 3 times the energy that we're producing in Canada today. 3 times to replace, we're producing 20% of our energy production in Canada is fossil fuels. The rest is hydro and nuclear. We have to increase our power production 3 times. That's the critical issue here.
Yeah. We're very aggressive, the mandate that's been publicly stated. I think it's very challenging for Canada to hit those goals. We have supply chain issues. Electric cars aren't even sometimes taking 10 months to be delivered. I don't know how we're going to hit our manufacturing goals in the next couple of years in the short term. That being said, it's a huge opportunity for Canada to become a world leader in critical minerals. And that's in all facets, whether it's, you know, zinc air batteries, copper. I mean, we have challenges with our country as well geographically. A lot of these deposits are in remote areas that don't have any infrastructure. And regulatory has to change. You know, it can't take 10, 15, 20 years to get a mining license and a mine up and going and hit these mandates in 15 and 20 years. So, you know, all the way down even chargers. You know, and we have a cold climate nation, you know, so it's not easy on those batteries.
I think in some respects, Canada's defined what we need for critical minerals. I think my question would be why? Is Canada looking at, you know, building chip plants? Are we going to start manufacturing computers here, solar components? If this is for domestic supply, why do we actually need these minerals? And are we actually moving forward that we're internalizing and building a lot of these technological projects ourselves? You know, we certainly define why. There's the tax breaks to get it. But as explorers and move these things forward as a domestic supply, then as a Canadian government and Canadian companies actually going to buy the domestic supply that we find.
Well, I'm hearing about challenges, and where there are challenges, there are also opportunities. So I pose the question to you, do you see a world in which supply chains become separated, or will we be able to cooperate on an international scale to secure global supply of these minerals?
Again, it is a great opportunity for a country like Canada. We're resource rich, just a very small producer at the moment, under 3 or 4% of global minerals for critical. You know, we do have some, the geopolitical landscape is creating challenges as well, and also opportunity, you know. So, you know, I'm from the United States, and we have you know, since the Cold War. So here's an example. So stockpiles, critical mineral stockpiles in the United States used to be, the peak numbers around 42 billion in today's value in the Cold War. It's less than $1 billion now. They've sold that off, and now it's going to be potentially bankrupt within 2025. So you've probably read Pentagon and the DOD in the United States has now turned around and said, okay, we're going to allow, under the Cold War Act with Canada, to buy direct from mining and buy mines and so on, both cross-border. But they haven't opened that up to any other country. So we have an opportunity with our neighbors to the south to be a leader, you know, for the United States consumption because of the geopolitical issues around the world right now. So there's an opportunity, but we're coming late to the party. We have to get going on that as a nation.
If I could add to that on the energy perspective, little do people know, there's 440 operating nuclear reactors in the world, and the growth in demand is going to be huge. Clearly, 30% of the uranium enrichment and conversion capacity comes from Russia. So 30% of what's going into nuclear reactors in the Western world is coming out of Russian facilities. There's a security supply issue here for sure. And our neighbors to the south in the United States have to look towards Canada, I believe, to supply those resources and in the future.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the last however many decades, I think, of a pretty aggressive pursuit of globalization and supply chain, you know, globalization. And I think we're now waking up to the fact that, in part because of COVID, kind of made us realize the fragility of a supply chain where we're reliant on the other side of the earth. But I think now politically, do we want to be reliant on a country that maybe we're not friendly with, Russia, China? For us, you know, what we're looking at in terms of the tungsten project in particular, 85% of that is mined in China. There's not a single tungsten mine in North America. And this is something that's extremely important for manufacturing, aerospace, but defense. And you can imagine, you talk about the US DOD, you can imagine how thrilled they are that their military, you know, industrial defense complex is reliant on Chinese tungsten, right? So that's not good sense. And so that deglobalization and that restocking and that regional restocking is going to mean we're going to have to restock to levels above where we were before, because we can't necessarily rely on a zinc or copper or uranium or tungsten stockpile in another country that we may not be on friendly terms with, which previously I think people took for granted.
I think maybe it's, you know, maybe the first time in history we're seeing a massive transformation. I call it demand by decree. We have governments putting these policies in place that we are moving towards renewable energy. but they don't have a supply chain, and you need ESG copper, you need ESG tungsten, all these things, and these are only coming from so many countries. So it's really contingent on countries to make these deals and find the supply chain, much following the Japanese multinationals have been doing. Sumitomo, Mitsubishi, Mitsui, taking offtake agreements, direct equity investments, and for order France, Germany, Japan, Sweden, on and on, to actually get their supplies, they have to come to Canada, they have to come to Australia, they have to come to the US, and they have to sign their own deals. So this whole shared notion of natural resources, I think it's going to be much more competitive than people are expecting here.
Well, I'd like to segue into my next question. What is the contribution of your company's mineral of choice to the energy and transition, and why is it considered critical?
Yeah, I mean, so, we're dealing with zinc and tungsten. Every bridge in the world and every car in the world would rust in about 15 months if it wasn't galvanized steel. And that's just the basic demand, the criticalness of it. And certainly in terms of the energy transition, there are no wind farms or solar farms without the galvanized steel structures that build them. In terms of tungsten, zero, tooling of steel without tungsten, without those hardened steels. The high temperature aerospace applications, impossible without tungsten. So it is, they're both, although perhaps a little mundane, I don't think people, and I wouldn't say that the growth story for either of them are, for example, the same growth story of copper, nickel, or uranium, but there's no doubt that they are absolutely unavoidable in any modern society.
Yeah, well, in Canada here anyways, Manitoba, BC, and Quebec are blessed with hydropower, flooding acres and acres of rivers in a past history to provide baseload energy. The key here is baseload energy is a requirement, 24/7, 365 days a year, anywhere in Canada. The only other baseload source of energy is nuclear. Nuclear energy provides that kind of power. Why do you think Ontario, which is the manufacturing hub of the country, is 60% nuclear? Because it cranks out power the whole time. And uranium is the answer. Canada is blessed with its uranium mines in the Athabasca Basin of Saskatchewan, which are the richest, highest grade uranium mines in the world. And we produce 20% of the world's uranium. So that's why uranium is critical to Canada.
Yeah, I'm sure that CANDU reactor sales have gone up. I think Japan's back online and more demand. Other countries are revisiting the nuclear clean.
Oh, for sure,
yeah.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, CANDU kind of lost the marketing and competitive race, but we still have lots of good CANDU reactors here in Canada and abroad, actually. Yeah. But the major nuclear companies are the GE, Hitachis, and
yeah, we're using new technology for VMS exploration in Bathurst, world famous camp. VMS is your copper, lead, zinc, silver, and gold. So very economic deposits, very big. I think the Bathurst 12 mine lasted over 60 years and didn't run out of ore, just became very unstable because most of the deposits are vertical. So they got to go down quite deep. But if you bring it into your life today, it's essential, not just critical. Your copper wiring, your copper cars, your copper chargers, which we are 2-3 million stations short to use really in Canada. You might go to your home and to work, but you're not going to drive to New Brunswick. I think it was the Canadian Council said we're 2 million stations already short across the country for charging. Lead, zinc, zinc for your solar panels and cloud storage, low-grade storage batteries, and silver as well for solar panels. So it's every part. It's essential more than critical. It is critical for certain aspects, but it's essential for us right now, these minerals.
And we're looking for copper, obviously, very important in the transmission, generation, delivery of electricity. Depending on these projections you look at, we're about 26 million tons of primary and secondary right now. Depending on whose projections you look at, by 2040, 2050, that's doubling to somewhere to 40, 50 million tons. The copper isn't there. I think we're well served for the next few years with some of these mines coming online. Quebrada Blanco, Quelavaco, obviously Kamoa-Kakula and DRC. But from there, there's a significant gap in between. And it's 10 to 15 years to build these things. There's some serious supply issues here on the copper side.
Well, I want to move things over to the environmental side of things. What key industries will help us leave an impact and reach those net zero targets? And how do critical minerals play a role?
Yeah, energy, obviously, right?
Okay, well, it comes down to uranium. So uranium produces zero carbon, and it produces baseload energy. It's very efficient, 92% energy efficiency compared to wind, which is 37% energy efficiency, and solar, which is 27% energy efficiency. And it doesn't go all the time. Then you have to build a whole battery, a battery infrastructure, which is going to be required. It's critical. It's going to be needed to store the energy that comes from the renewables. And there is going to be a place for renewable energy, for sure. But we still need baseload energy. We need energy that hums 24 hours a day for 365 days a year.
I think everyone likes to point to EVs. I don't think they're the savior that we think they are. It's giving, as I said, that EVs won't save the environment, but they'll save the automobile industry, I think is the argument I've heard. I think a better change, if we really want to hit a net zero, is a better infrastructure in terms of inter and intra-city trains, buses, etc., and certainly shipping as well, right, has a big part to play in reducing emissions. So I look at EVs are an important step, but I think really we look at other forms of transportation are probably more likely to drive net zero.
Yeah, the environmental side, obviously we're going to rewire the world for ESG purposes. Obviously the products and the solutions for the power generation of the vehicles have to be ESG friendly. And I think there's a lot of work to do there still. There's about 1.8 billion vehicles in the world. Well, we're going to destroy 1.8 billion vehicles and rebuild 1.8 billion vehicles electric. I think it's the biggest drain on the world's resources in history.
So what are the opportunities to reclaim and recycle critical minerals? And do you think this could become a meaningful source of supply going forward for Canada?
Well, recycling is a lag, right? So you can only recycle the metal that's out there, and some metal, when it's like uranium, you can't, this is done, right? It's literally consumed. Yes, copper, big recycling, but yeah, but you can only recycle what's available to recycle. Like I said, that's based on past supply. You talk about the doubling of copper demand. There's no avoiding, if you actually want to hit that, there's no avoiding, you need a heck of a lot more mines. I am not super convinced that we'll get there. I struggle to see a path to double copper production or any production. So I think we're gonna have to be a little more creative, but who knows?
I recently saw some numbers on zinc, right? And it's a tripling in the demand of output, going, from, I think it's almost going to be 1 million tons, 1 million pounds, right, a day. And then the U.S. can't have a $10 trillion infrastructure revamp without zinc, like bridges, schools, copper, and the growth rate, from the population, the appetite, like it's just. And we haven't even talked about potash as a critical mineral, right? We're the #1 in the world in potash. China and certain countries need food. So it's only going to be more of a demand going forward.
Well, I think the recycling's great, and I think absolutely push for the most recycling we can do. That's a sensible thing, but I think this notion that we can reduce mining with recycling is absurdity.
Moving over to my next question, is a self-contained supply chain within Canada feasible for production of goods such as batteries or other green tech items that critical minerals enable?
I think we certainly have the resources. Do we have the manufacturing capacity and population to support it? I think is the question.
And do we want to, right? Like, I think it's fine to say we don't want to be reliant on China. We're so tightly integrated with the US. I don't think it's the end of the world to say that we can divide and conquer between Canada and the US, or Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, EU, et cetera, right? Like, I think that you can, you got the term onshoring, but I think that, what's the new term, friendshoring, that they described it, right? Which is to say, okay, let's not try to be everything in Canada, but let's pick what we're really good at, which is certainly mining, manufacturing where we can and where it makes sense. Certainly where upgrading results in a higher value density for shipping. But I don't think we need to be everything.
Yeah, I mean, we want to mine the metals. We're explorers. We want to see mines. We need to have the mines to get these metals. I think we should certainly focus on more value-added industries. For an example, Saskatchewan is developing a rare earth minerals processing facility. That's the kind of stuff we need if we want to keep that here. And I agree with Brandon. We're going to have a north-south corridor with our neighbors to the south that we have to work with.
And look what's happening in Europe. The crazy spike in zinc prices recently was smelter-driven, and that was all because these are smelters that are powered by really natural gas and Russian natural gas. Canada has such a unique opportunity in terms of Quebec and BC, et cetera, where we have a few hydro-powered smelters, but why not more, right? I think we've got cheap, green, low carbon power here. It seems crazy for these super energy intensive things for us not to do more of it.
I mean, I think it's opened a door for Canada back to being a leader, potential leader, one with technology, manpower, skilled training, changing into these technology-driven industries. And our biggest consumer and our biggest customer is right across the bridge, and where they're going politically and economically. And I think it just makes so much sense for Canada. It's a great window. I think the Prime Minister is down there trying to bridge that too recently.
Well, I'm hearing that there are a lot of changes happening and incoming. So for our investors, what changes should they be aware of?
Well, I think on the on the exploration side, this demand is being created. At some point, it reaches a critical mass, and the majority of the vehicles are built, the power generation's in place, and then that demand falls off significantly. So I imagine we'll get to it. The OEMs, the people, the companies are really going to benefit here, have to come into this industry. We can't take all the risks looking out 10 years to build it, another 5 years to commission, pay off the debt in the middle of it. When we're actually start making money, the demand starts to drift. And then, a lot of projects will be bankrupt and copper prices will crash. So it's up to these, Tesla, Ford, Siemens, Mitsubishi, these guys are actually manufacturing. You've created the demand. Well, if you want it, you have to come and get it.
Well, I think investors should also be aware that I think I've expressed my skepticism. I don't think it's quite cynicism that we're gonna hit the metal production goals that the governments would like us to hit. If we fall, I don't think we have the capital. I don't think we have the political will, despite what they're saying, and I don't think we have the skills. I don't think we have the skilled people to hit those goals. And what that means is that companies that are finding something or have something already are sitting on literal scarce commodities, right? It's not going to be a matter of flick a switch, we'll do a bunch of great exploration, we'll find the next great copper, zinc, uranium deposits. It is extremely difficult for those of us who have something. There's going to be an inflection point in the market when the generalist realizes that metal resources are extraordinarily valuable, and there's going to be a flood of generalist money into our space, and valuations are going to go through the roof.
Well, I mean, I think Brandon hit a lot of points that are, it's going to be a challenge, but that's how we built this country, right? By meeting the challenge. So yeah, let's get out there and do it. And, you know, we can't over-regulate this industry to make this happen. I mean, this has got to happen now. So investors have to recognize that, but, you know, the people that you see, that you had breakfast with this morning in the restaurant, all those people that are in that restaurant, did they have any idea where the 52 metals come from your phone? You know, yeah. Like 52 metals are in that phone. They think it comes from an iPhone store, comes from the ground. And I think that's the kind of education that needs to be done personally.
Yeah, I think as a nation, we have to be aligned from the federal government, provincial government, having one process, not two processes that delays and lags the evolution of the mine coming to production to 10, 20 years. It's too long. Technology is getting leapfrogged. They're already working on carbonless or cobalt-less batteries for the electric vehicles, right? I think there was just an announcement last week in the U.S. Getting rid of lithium in the car battery and going with a permanent magnet. So that technology is always going to evolve, right? I think I got to use your quote, I think earlier, but I'll give you full credit for it, right? Might save the auto industry. I like that a lot. But yeah, it's going to continue to evolve, but base metals is not going away. And they are pulled into critical minerals, but base metals are in every day. Not just new technology. They're required every day to turn your dishwasher on, your house lights, whether it's, and we have a big problem in the US with, okay, we all have electric cars. How are you going to charge them? California, last year they announced, what was it, curfew for electric cars because they had to put the air conditioner on for a couple of weeks. So the grid was going down, right? It's coal-based, it's electric-based, it's not nuclear-based. Like we have a lot of moving parts as an infrastructure and an economy to really say this is going to execute perfectly, and it's not. And we have a lot of challenges, but huge opportunity if we can all work together and expedite the process.
Well, just on that note of working together, and we've talked about the car industry a little bit. When it comes to critical minerals, we are seeing an interest in the mining sector from upstream industries such as the car manufacturer. So how can capital from these companies upstream in the supply chain work its way into junior markets?
I think in many respects they've created the demand and they're the ones that will benefit. The car manufacturers, and you know, Tesla is about a $600–700 billion company. You expect a $20–30 million market cap Explorer to take all the financing risks, the reputational risks, the environmental risks to move this forward. You know, these guys have to provide the capital and come into these companies and move it forward. I know Tesla's very active in Australia. I believe they bought into Talon Metals and copper in northern Michigan. And you know, they'll have to continue to supply and secure their supply chain. They'll have to approach junior and developers and early stage companies, provide the financing and the backbone to move this forward.
Yeah, I think that I prior to this was in Miami at the BMO conference there, and there was I think 6 automobile manufacturers present for the first time ever, right? So they are extremely serious about this. I'm not sure they get our industry. It's a tough industry. It's an esoteric industry. So, but I think those downstream, consumers need to start realizing that the metal just doesn't magically appear when they need it, right? So hopefully those investments come.
Copper. That's my answer. We need lots of copper, base metals. The deposits come with lead and zinc, and as a general rule, so we're going to need lots of base metals.
Yeah, I mean, in the junior mining and the exploration model investment, right? So what the government's done with the super flow through and the 30% federal tax credit has been very well received. Canada's always relied on foreign investment. I think that's a slipperier slope nowadays. We'll have to do a lot of due diligence on foreign nationals, corporations, countries, and they are raising the bar there. But I think everybody knows we got 2050s coming very quickly, And there is going to be a lot of capital thrown at this sector, junior or mines that are in production or so on, and joint venture, like you were mentioning with the auto industry and metals companies. So it's coming. It's coming. It's sometimes slower than people think or understand, but it's coming.
You know, I think in the flow-through side, these tax-driven financing strategies, they give you the ability to raise capital, but it also makes very cheap stock for investors. And they're getting a 30% discount. And, you know, quite often, 4 months in a day, you're seeing a lot of that stock back. So, you know, there's certainly the financing is there, but it's an issue that, you know, we need proper shareholders to see the long-term goals here.
What progress do each of you expect to see in this sector 5 to 10 years from now? Keyword expect.
Well, again, it's really based on projections and this, you know, these blossoming demand. You know, obviously, if we're going to meet some of these targets, which they are targets, then we have to have a lot of these mines come on side. And, you know, we have to discover them first. We have to get them commissioned and permitted, and that's, you know, minimum 10 years. And if we look at North America, you know, the 5 biggest projects, Seabridge's KSM is 30 years in, it hasn't been built. Pebble's been canceled again. Antofagasta's Twin Metals has been canceled. Resolution has been probably 20 years in, which leaves, I believe, Ann Mason's project with Teck and a couple other smaller ones. But, you know, these big projects we already have defined and ready to go, shovel ready, they're not getting permitted and they're not getting built.
Yeah, I think, you know, Yukon specifically, within the next 5-ish years, there'll be successor legislation. So new mining legislation for the first time since the 1890s, I think, believe it or not. I think hopefully that's kind of a microcosm of what we'll see with other levels of government and other nations of government, where they realize that, you know, throwing a little bit of money at it and telling companies to make it happen it's not a switch, it's not going to happen. So will we finally see them get serious about streamlining permits? Nobody wants to build a bad mine, but I think we've as an industry, or at least government, has confused a lengthy process as a rigorous one. And I think maybe they'll recognize that you can have rigor without length. And I would hope that in the next couple of years, we start to see significant changes in legislation.
Well said.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not very optimistic 5 years from now. I'm not very optimistic that that the world's got this figured out. It's going to take the S hitting the fan, right, before people are going to wake up to this reality, in my view. So, yeah, in 5 years, we're still going to be struggling, in my view, unless we have some real leadership in development and the regulatory framework being relaxed a little bit. You know, we can work with First Nations, things like that, absolutely. But
the longer it takes to fix, the more response we'll see in metals pricing, right? Because if we can't, there's such a lag factor between fixing it and then you might get some new mines on in 8 years, right? So fixing it, whatever fixing it looks like, right? So I think for the incumbents, unfortunately, we're going to benefit from them not fixing it to a degree, right? So it's, yeah. So not that I don't want that to happen, but there's sometimes being ahead of the curve is good.
I mean, in my world, my little micro world, for our projects, we're using leading edge technology that's really proved out for us. And about every 20 years or so, we see this breakthrough in exploration technology that facilitates a rash of discoveries, at least in the Bathurst area, whether it's VTEM or gravity or mag, and the cost of drone-based UAV mag that goes down almost a kilometer, 25-meter spacing, no Lamar helicopters, human interaction. It goes 24 hours a day, and it's very cheap and can give you 3D subsurface modeling. We have really, our drill programs have been very successful. Now to where we're hitting 7 out of 8 drill holes for EMS in new areas. So there is going to be, it might take some time, and the algorithms are getting better and the reprocessing, but I think there is going to be some discoveries coming globally. We haven't had a big one in decades, you know, outside of in Chile, where we have some experience in Candelaria and Prominent Hill and these big monster deposits. There hasn't been one in a long time. And our appetite's growing exponentially, whether it's critical or just household use. we have to be able to find these too. And it's not easy. As he mentioned, it's not easy to find deposits hidden with no outcrop. And it's not cheap. So back to your investment and you know.
Well, it's lots to watch out for and lots to consider. So I want to thank, you know, each and every one of you for joining us and sharing your insights with our viewers at CEO.CA.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Pleasure.